Okay, folks, welcome back to Battle for Azeroth. Wanted to do a stata for Fire Mage. Mages had been seeming like they were somewhat overpowered in PvP recently, and I wanted to play around on mine just to kind of see for myself. Last stata video I made was during beta, where I went over all three classes, so I thought it'd be a good time to take a little closer look at Fire Mage while it was still fresh in my mind. A couple things worth mentioning. We are a little ways out from the next patch, the first patch for Battle for Azeroth. I've looked at the patch notes, and most of the changes I saw were just balancing changes, so the things shouldn't be changing that much. So don't know exactly how true a lot of this will hold up or what changes will come. Most of this should remain pretty much the same, though. From what I've seen, they're not changing talents, they're not adding or removing any spells, abilities, anything like that. So the second thing is that I am using a wand. The last time I can remember using a wand, I think we still had a relic slot. Yeah, that was a while ago. So I'm just not sure how that affects my DPS. I'm not all that familiar with using wands. If I was using a staff, or being a fire mage, if I was using like a one-handed sword and then an offhand or something, I could kind of look at it and go, okay, I'd be doing better if I was using a staff, or if I swapped this out for this stat, what have you. Just wands, I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure of all. I'm just not that familiar with. So I don't know if how much that is affecting my damage, as it were. So I'm going to try to briefly explain the setup that I use, which I have settled on after playing around pretty extensively with a few of the swapping around a few of the talents. The setup that I have settled on is more of a PvP or more of an AoE, excuse me, focused setup, and then I'm going to show you the one that I kept noticing a lot of other mages using, which is more of a single target focus setup. So the main two things that I took for mine was Flame Patch, which allows Flame Strike to leave behind a patch of flames, which burns enemies within it for X amount of fire damage over 8 seconds. I've tried all three of these. I've tried Conflagration, I've tried Living Bomb. For the way I play, Flame Patch works the best. I had the highest DPS with Flame Patch. The second thing I played around with was the last tier. I took Meteor somewhat begrudgingly because I already had Flame Patch. You really don't need two AoE abilities. And Meteor has a delay. It calls down a meteor which lands at the location after 3 seconds. So in PvP, 3 seconds can be a long time. And in fact, I have used this, and people have moved just enough out of it that it ends up hitting nothing. So I tried Kindling. Basically your ability to reduce the cooldown of combustion by 1 second. There's like 3 different classes that have an ability like this that reduces the cooldown of something by 1 second. I've tried them all. They're all they're just not that effective. is probably the best way to put it. Pyroclasm allows you to, after you consume a hot streak, to cast a Pyroblast with 225% additional damage, which you're never going to want. Pyroblast has a 4-second cast time. In PvP, you're never going to want to use this without the hot streak. I have played around with this. Admittedly, the first time I read it, I just kind of glanced over it. I misread it. I've seen some mages take this. I think this is more, would be more effective in like a raid, in raiding. So when you take out these two, by default, Meteor was only one left. Admittedly, I have grown to appreciate it a little more. It's a very situational ability. You're going to be using Flame Strike most of the time if you use an AoE ability, because Hot Streak will affect it. Pyroblast is your single target. Flame Strike is your AoE ability. However, if you are, if you're in a skirmish for a flag or a base, something like that, something where there's, a large group of players, people, using these two, Meteor has a 45-second cooldown. Flame Strike can be spammed, and it will proc. It will give you a critical strike proc off itself. So both Pyroblast and Flame Strike will. So you can get those back to back. I've gotten a back to back like 2-3 times. So. You have things that will increase your chance to receive a hot streak. You get increased critical strike from a passive, so that really shouldn't be a problem. It's just a matter of figuring out your rotation. And that's pretty much it. If I had to mention anything else, I took Firestarter. Your Fireball reduces the cooldown of your combustion by 5 seconds. No, wait. Tinder. There we go. If you have not cast Fireball for 8 seconds, your next Fireball will deal 30% increased damage with a 50% reduced cast time. So you will end up in somewhat rare moments where Fire Blast and Phoenix Flames are both on cooldown. They made Phoenix Flames was our artifact. They made it a talent. Fire Frost, and I want to say Arcane. I don't remember for sure. Got their artifacts turned into talents. So there will be those rare moments where those are on. Both are on cooldown, so being able to use Fireball is not terrible, and I like Tinder. Tinder kind of gives you a little more incentive. I normally don't use it because it has a 2-second cast time, and it does, not terrible damage, but lower damage. So in PvP, if you're going to take time to cast something, you want to make it worthwhile, worth your time. Remember, you are a mage, you are a clothy, you can be killed quite easily depending on which class you are being attacked by. So yeah, and that's pretty much it. So I went in thinking originally that I could just spam Pyroblast. You can do that. You'll get around 300k, which is about on the lower end of the DPS. Not terrible, but nevertheless on the lower end. When everything works like it's supposed to, I've been getting around 600k, I think, somewhere around there. That pretty well. At most games I was on par with other mages that were in the game. Generally was pretty well right in the middle, so I was pretty happy with myself. It's like, okay, that's fine. There's room to, you're leveling, you're changing gear, stuff like that. So there's a lot of variables when you're leveling. You shouldn't take the numbers, too seriously, too much to heart. When you've reached max level and you're trying to get geared and things like that, then you should, look to try to improve a little bit until you get fully geared, and then focus on your rotation and whatnot is generally what I'll do. So max level PvP and kind of leveling, doing PvP leveling are somewhat different. So just bear that in mind. The single target setup I had been noticing is mages will take Searing Touch, which affects Scorch. Deals increased damage, guaranteed critical strike when the target is below 30% health. And then they will take either... surprisingly, a lot of mages didn't take Phoenix Flames. I was surprised by that. They'll take either Flame On, which reduces the cooldown of Fire Blast by 2 seconds and increases the maximum number of charges by 1, or they'll take Alexstrasza's Fury. Dragon Breath always deals critical strikes and contributes to Hot Streak. So either one of these, you can kind of see the synergy there. Either one of these will work. And then they'll take Living Bomb, which works pretty much like it did in Mists of Pandaria. Does single target damage with the cleave effect. Most mages took Meteor. As I said, some took Pyroclasm. I don't recall any that took Kindling. I'm sure I may have looked at one or two that did, but generally it was Meteor. So, and then they took Greater Pyroblast. This is not affected by Hot Streak. So if you want to cast this, you are casting the full 4-second cast. When I first noticed that mages were kind of overpowered, every mage I looked at had taken this. Now, less so. I think people have kind of figured out, it's kind of a cool concept. It's kind of fun. 4 seconds, so you can be killed in 4 seconds in PvP. So, so that's pretty much it. Like I said, it seems to work. This is the setup that I have gotten the highest amount of damage with. So, and it's fairly fun to play. If you can spam Flame Strike, you'll leave behind a Flame Patch. Multiple flame patches on the ground, so you can really get some pretty... It doesn't look like it does much, kind of at first glance. It can do quite a bit of AoE damage. So I noticed the games where I'm not able to do as much AoE damage, my DPS does seem to be a tad lower. Other games, again, a lot of it kind of depends on your group to some degree as well. The better groups I was in, where we had a little better coordination, a little better DPS, I was able to do more single target damage. I was able to do a little better with single target damage. I wasn't dying as quite as often. Was able to run through my rotation a little more. So, so there you go, folks. There's a little state of video for Fire Mage, a little PvP focused for you there. Nevertheless, I think you can pretty well use either setup, either PvE, PvP, just depending on what you're doing. So with the amount of trash that are in the Battle for Azeroth dungeons, having a little more AoE is not going to be a bad thing. So there you go, folks. Hope you enjoyed that and hope that was helpful for you, and thank you for watching.